Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The memory extraction chamber was a sterile, humming space where nothing felt alive except for the faint rise and fall of the comatose woman's chest. Dorian Vail stood at the edge of the platform, staring down at the subject with a mix of curiosity and unease. Aelia Cross, they had been told, held the key to a priceless memory, a fragment so valuable that the collector who had hired Dorian refused to explain its purpose. And that was where the trouble began. "Do you ever ask yourself what it's worth?" came the sharp voice of the collector, cutting through the stillness like a blade. Dorian turned to see her emerge from the shadows, her sleek coat flowing behind her. The collector exuded precision and menace, her every movement deliberate. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes fixed on Aelia's unmoving form. "What's worth what?" Dorian asked, their tone guarded. "Memory," the collector said simply, as if the answer should have been obvious. "The foundation of identity, the currency of humanity. People will give up everything for the right one." "Funny, I thought we were supposed to guard memories, not ransack them," Dorian replied, their voice dry. The collector smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. This isn't about ransacking, it's about recovery. That fragment is important, not just to me, but to you as well." Dorian blinked, caught off guard. "To me? What are you talking about?" "You'll see soon enough," the collector said, stepping aside to gesture toward the interface. "The labyrinth within her mind will make it clear. But a warning, shared dreamscapes, especially for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Dorian's unease deepened. "You have your own ghosts," she said cryptically. "Ghosts that could lead you astray. Don't let them." Before Dorian could respond, the collector stepped back into the shadows, her presence as fleeting as it was unnerving. The interface surged to life, enveloping Dorian in light as the chamber dissolved around them. When the transition ended, they found themselves standing in an impossible landscape. The dreamscape stretched out in every direction, a chaotic blend of surreal beauty and foreboding menace. Floating islands glowed faintly against a swirling purple sky, and towering structures twisted like they had been carved from nightmares. Somewhere in the distance, a massive spire loomed, its jagged edges glowing faintly blue. Dorian inhaled sharply, the air here heavy and sharp. The spire pulled at them like a magnet, its presence dominating the dreamscape. They didn't need directions to know that whatever fragment they were searching for was there. "You shouldn't have come." The voice came from behind them, startling Dorian. They turned to see a woman standing a few paces away. Aelia Cross, alive and vibrant, her dark eyes fixed on them with a mix of anger and curiosity. She was different from the woman on the platform. This version of her radiated power, the dreamscape bending subtly around her. Dorian stepped back instinctively. "You're awake?" "Not exactly," Aelia replied. Her voice was sharp, but her posture was defensive, as though she were bracing for a fight. "This is my mind, not yours, and I don't want you here." Dorian frowned, folding their arms. "Then why does your mind have a door? Someone clearly wanted me to find something." Aelia's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. That fragment you're after, it's not just mine, it's part of something bigger. And if you take it, you'll unravel everything." Dorian hesitated, the pull of the spire growing stronger. "I'm just here to do a job." "That's what you said last time," Aelia said coldly. Her words hung in the air, striking like a thunderclap. "Last time?" Dorian asked, their voice faltering. "What are you talking about?" Aelia didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand and the ground beneath them shifted. The platform cracked, sending jagged shards of glowing stone into the air. Gravity tilted violently and Dorian stumbled, falling toward the void below. They landed in a dense, fog-shrouded forest of towering black trees. The air here was colder, and the silence felt oppressive. Dorian staggered to their feet, their pulse racing as they tried to orient themselves. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their bark etched with faint, glowing symbols. "Where are you taking me?" Dorian muttered, their voice swallowed by the fog. Ahead, a silhouette moved between the trees, Aelia's shape, flickering and fragmented like a glitch in reality. Dorian followed, their footsteps crunching against an invisible surface. Whispers brushed against their ears as they moved. faint and unintelligible at first, but growing louder with every step. The whispers became words, phrases that sent chills down Dorian's spine. They heard fragments of conversations, their own voice among them. Arguments, confessions, decisions they couldn't remember making. The words felt too real to dismiss, too specific to ignore. "This isn't your first time here," Aelia's voice called, distant but unmistakable. Dorian quickened their pace, finally breaking through the fog into a clearing. There, at the centre, stood Aelia, her expression a mix of sadness and defiance. Behind her, the spire loomed closer than ever, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "Why can't I remember?" Dorian demanded, their voice trembling. "Because you chose to forget," Aelia said simply. "But the labyrinth never forgets." Dorian's knees felt weak as the realization sank in. The fragment they had been sent to retrieve wasn't just a piece of Aelia's mind, it was a piece of their own. The clearing around the spire shimmered as if it were alive, the air thick with a tension that seemed to press against Dorian's chest. Aelia stood between them and the towering structure, her posture rigid and her expression unreadable. The symbols carved into the spire's surface pulsed faintly, and Dorian felt the pull of its energy grow stronger with every second. "What do you mean I chose to forget?" Dorian demanded, their voice raw with confusion. "I've never been here before. I don't even know you." Aelia's eyes flicked toward the spire, her expression softening just slightly. "That's what you told yourself. But this place, this labyrinth, it holds the truth you've been running from. The fragment you're here to retrieve isn't just part of me. It's the memory of what you did." Dorian felt their breath catch, the weight of her words sinking into their chests like a stone. "What I did? That doesn't make sense. I don't even know what this place is." Aelia stepped closer, her voice lowering. "It's a prison. The labyrinth was created to contain something dangerous. A long time ago, you came here to study it. You thought you could control it, harness its power for something greater. But you failed, and when everything collapsed, you erased the memory of what happened. You left me here to keep it locked away." The ground beneath them shifted subtly, and the symbols on the spire brightened, their light flickering erratically. The labyrinth itself seemed to react to Aelia's words as if it remembered too. Dorian staggered back, shaking their head. "No, that's not possible. I've never—" "You have," Aelia interrupted sharply, her tone hardening. "And you've come back because someone sent you, didn't they? Someone who doesn't care what happens if you unlock the labyrinth." "The Collector," Dorian murmured, their stomach twisting. They thought of the Collector's cold smile, her cryptic warnings about ghosts, her refusal to explain the fragment's significance. The truth began to take shape, horrifying and undeniable. "What happens if I take the fragment?" Dorian asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Aelia's expression darkened. "The labyrinth will collapse. Everything it's contained, everything we sealed away will be unleashed. I'll be gone, and whatever's out there will have nothing stopping it. And if I don't—" Aelia hesitated, the sadness in her eyes deepening. "The labyrinth will remain, but it'll keep pulling people in. People like you, people like her. It doesn't stop unless it's destroyed." Dorian clenched their fists, torn between the pull of the spire and the crushing weight of the decision before them. They wanted to believe there was a third option, a way to salvage everything, but the labyrinth's hum seemed to mock their hope. Its rhythm quickened, the pulsing light intensifying, as if it could sense their hesitation. Before Dorian could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently, sending cracks spidering through the clearing. The air grew colder, and a low, guttural sound echoed from the spire. A shadowy figure emerged from its base, its form twisting and shifting like smoke caught in a storm. Its glowing eyes locked onto Dorian, and the whispering voices from earlier rose into a cacophony. "It's waking up," Aelia said, her voice tight with fear. "You don't have much time." The creature stepped forward, its tendrils reaching out like grasping hands. Dorian raised their arms instinctively, but Aelia stepped between them and the figure, her hand raised. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice commanding. The creature froze, its tendrils twitching as though struggling against an invisible force. Aelia turned to Dorian, her face pale. "It's tied to the labyrinth. If you take the fragment, it'll break free." Dorian's mind raced, their thoughts a blur of panic and doubt. But if I don't, it'll keep growing, Aelia said, cutting them off. You can't undo what's already been done, but you can stop it from spreading. The creature let out a guttural growl, its glowing eyes narrowing. The labyrinth shuddered again, the symbols on the spire flickering wildly. Dorian took a step toward the glowing entrance of the spire, their chests tight with indecision. "Why me?" they asked, their voice trembling. "Why did I come back?" Aelia's gaze softened, and for the first time, Dorian saw a flicker of compassion in her eyes. Because deep down, you know this is your responsibility. You tried to run from it, but the labyrinth doesn't let go. Dorian closed their eyes, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They thought of the collector, her manipulations and half-truths. They thought of the faces they'd seen in the dreamscape, the fragments of lives pulled into the labyrinth's orbit. And they thought of Aelia, who had spent years guarding the truth they had tried to bury. When they opened their eyes, they stepped toward the spire. "I'm sorry," Dorian said softly, their voice carrying over with the tremors. Aelia's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Just remember, the truth isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's a cage." Dorian reached out, their hand trembling as it touched the glowing fragment. The light flared, enveloping them in a blinding glow. The ground gave way beneath their feet, and the dreamscape dissolved into chaos. Aelia's voice echoed one last time, fading into the light. "Don't forget again!" And then there was nothing but the truth. The light enveloping Dorian was unlike anything they had ever experienced, blinding, searing, and somehow deeply personal. It wasn't just light, it was knowledge, emotion, and memory crashing into them all at once. The fragment was no longer just an object. It was alive, pulsing with pieces of a forgotten past. Dorian's forgotten past. When the light receded, they found themselves standing in a vast, empty expanse, the spire gone. The ground beneath their feet was smooth and reflective, mirroring the endless sky above, which churned with storm clouds and flashes of blue lightning. In the centre of this void stood Aelia, her form solid, but as though she were tethered to this space by sheer will. "You remember now, don't you?" Aelia asked, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. Dorian's head throbbed with the weight of the memories flooding back. Images of the labyrinth, the experiment, and their role in the disaster played out in vivid detail. They saw themselves, younger and full of ambition, standing at the controls of a machine meant to extract and harness the labyrinth's energy. They saw Aelia by their side, warning them of the risks. They saw the catastrophic failure, the release of something ancient and uncontrollable, and the decision they had made to erase their part in it. "I thought I could fix it," Dorian said, their voice breaking. "I thought, if I could control it, I could make it right. And when you couldn't," Aelia said softly, "you ran. You erased your involvement and left the rest of us to clean up your mess." Dorian's shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. "I didn't know what else to do." Aelia took a step closer, her form flickering. "You came back because you couldn't outrun it. The labyrinth doesn't just hold memories, it amplifies them. It turns guilt into gravity. And you've been carrying this guilt for years, even if you couldn't name it." Dorian looked away, the storm clouds above casting jagged shadows on the reflective ground. "I can't undo what happened, but I can stop it from getting worse." Aelia's gaze softened. "That's what this fragment is. It's not just a piece of the labyrinth, it's a piece of you. It's your chance to take responsibility, but you know what it'll cost." Dorian looked at her, their throat tightening. "You." He nodded. "If the fragment is removed, the labyrinth will collapse, and with it, everything I've been holding together. The thing we tried to contain, it'll die with me, but so will this place." The silence stretched between them, the weight of the decision pressing down on Dorian like a physical force. They thought of the people who had been pulled into the labyrinth, the lives destroyed by its relentless pull. They thought of Aelia, who had spent years trapped here, fighting to hold the line. "There's no other way?" Dorian asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Aelia shook her head. "The labyrinth doesn't let go until it's destroyed, and the collector won't stop sending people here until she gets what she wants. If you don't end this now, it'll just start over." Dorian closed their eyes, taking a shaky breath. When they opened them, they met Aelia's gaze, their expression filled with determination. Then let's finish it. The fragment hovered between them, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. Dorian reached out, their fingers brushing against its surface. The moment they touched it, the ground beneath them began to crack, and the storm clouds above roared with thunder. Aelia's form flickered violently, but she didn't flinch. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "For not running this time." Dorian clenched their jaw, their heart pounding. "I'm sorry, Aelia, for everything." She smiled faintly, her edges growing fainter as the labyrinth began to unravel. "Don't forget again!" The fragment's light flared and the cracks in the ground widened. The entire void shuddered, collapsing in on itself. Dorian felt themselves falling, the weight of the labyrinth lifting, but leaving behind a deep ache. When they opened their eyes, they were back in the extraction chamber. The sterile light felt harsh after the vivid intensity of the dreamscape. Dorian sat up slowly, their body trembling. The collector stood at the edge of the room, her expression calm, but her eyes gleaming with interest. "You have it?" she asked. Dorian reached into their pocket and pulled out the fragment. Its light was dimmer now, contained but still powerful. They held it tightly, their mind racing with the memories they had regained and the knowledge of what the fragment truly was. "What are you going to do with it?" Dorian asked, their voice sharp. The collector's smile was cold. "That's not your concern." Dorian hesitated, their fingers tightening around the fragment. "You don't understand what this is. If you use it—" "I understand perfectly," the collector interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You've done your part. Now hand it over." Dorian stared at her, the weight of the decision pressing on them once again. The labyrinth was gone, but the danger wasn't over. This fragment, this piece of their past, was still a weapon in the wrong hands. Slowly they rose to their feet, the fragment glowing faintly in their palm. "No," they said, their voice steady. "I'm not making the same mistake twice." The collector's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of frustration. "Think carefully, Dorian." "I have," they said firmly, "and this time I'm not running." Without another word, they turned and walked out of the chamber, the fragment pulsing in their hand and the weight of the truth finally clear. The collector's voice echoed behind them, sharp with anger, but Dorian didn't look back. For the first time in years, they faced the future and their own reflection with no intention of forgetting. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.